The regular season is heating up, new stars are emerging, and that means more opportunities to win up to 25 times your cash on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection on a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's that easy. Let it fly to turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Watch your favorite players and get paid doing it this basketball season. See your entries make progress during the game or make new entries for the second half and the fourth quarter. 3-pointers, assists, rebounds, and everything in between are yours for the taking. Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Hi guys, quick one before we get into the episode. This episode is sponsored by Zencastr, which is the production suite that I've used from the very beginning of this podcast. And if you're interested in starting your own podcast, hang around at the end of the episode for our 30% discount referral code. Thanks.
So our podcast is called Right and Wrong.
Are these your notes?
These
Are these your notes about what we're going to say?
Anything
Nailed it.
is the short answer.
So how many novels did you not finish?
Oh my God, so many.
It was perfect. What's she talking about? This is nonsense.
Ooh, a spicy question. I love it.
This is it, guys. The big secret to getting published is you have to write a good book. You heard it here first. Hello, and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. Today, I'm joined by author and foodie journalist, Emma Hughes. Hey, Emma. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Thanks so much for coming on. It's great to have you on.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
You've done quite a breadth of writing across your career, but let's start with last year, your debut novel, No Such Thing as Perfect, came out. A romantic comedy about love and technology. Congratulations. It must have been so exciting to put your first book out into the world.
Thank you so much. Yes, it really, really was. And even a year on, I think it's still, my brain hasn't quite caught up with it. I still get a sort of almost like a kind of deja vu jolt, like if I walk into a bookshop and I see it and I think, hang on, is that, oh, yeah, that is my
I recognise that cover. Wait a second. That's great. I was interested to see though. So it came out in 2021.
Yes.
But it was actually shortlisted for both the Lucy Cavendish Fiction Prize and the Spotlight First Novel Award in 2019, 2 years prior to its publication.
Yes. Yeah, it was. And I think for me, because I'm a journalist and I've worked for newspapers and mostly weekly magazines for over a decade now. So I think, in my kind of day-to-day working life, I'd got very used to very short timescales, to be honest, and like a very short window between writing something and it actually kind of being out in the world and sort of existing as a thing beyond you.
Yeah.
And obviously on sort of one level, as a reader, I was aware that publishing is completely different and works in a much longer way. But I
slower way, I would say.
Exactly. Yes. But I think what I sort of hadn't really considered how it would feel or what it might mean to be, like sitting here in 2022 chatting to you about a book which I wrote in 2019 that I had been thinking about for kind of a couple of years before, and which has then kind of had, it's kind of existed in all of these different forms over that time, as a hardback and then as a paperback with quite a different look, and, sort of how it would, sort of what it would be like to be kind of coming out to like speak on behalf of sort of 2019 me, having kind of written another one since then. And I'm also working on my third novel now. And it's really interesting to me the way that kind of as an author, you have to kind of keep all those different versions of yourself and like your writing self that you all have to sit together all the time and kind of take it in turns to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sort of. Like you're almost harboring multiple personalities in your body.
Exactly.
Because you must grow between just the act of writing a book, a story, I think will trigger some growth in anyone, really. Like by the time you start and finish a story, I feel like you have changed, at least in some small way.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I can't remember if it was, I'm not about to compare myself to Hilary Mantel, but Hilary, I think it was Hilary Mantel who said that she kind of gets to the end of a draft and then has to go back to the start immediately because, obviously her books are very long, like much longer than mine. And so, the process of writing a full draft is, probably years. And, in that point, she feels like she, I guess has become a different person, as you're saying, in the course of writing it. So yeah, that's definitely something that you have to contend with. But I have to say, like, when I got the delivery of the paperbacks of No Such Thing as Perfect, my first novel, I did have a bit of a reread of it, and I can tell it's something I wrote a few years ago, but I don't actually think there really isn't very much I would change.
Well, that's good.
Which is, I feel like it kind of, I'm very happy for that to kind of stand as what it is. And that's a really unexpected feeling for me, because as a journalist, I find it really mortifying reading back over, articles I wrote a few years ago. And, the temptation when I've been kind of working at places where I've got access to the CMS to just go back and kind of fiddle and make them a bit less embarrassing is massive. So, that's been a pleasant surprise.
I guess that's probably a big difference between in journalism, where you need to turn something around in a week, versus in publishing, where it's going to be about 2 years before it's coming out.
Yes.
And many people are like iterating on that, and it's changing and evolving, and
Yeah, very, very much so. Very much so.
But I think it's quite a lot of authors quite famously dislike their early works. I think Zadie Smith very famously doesn't like her debut novels.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. She was really not keen on.
Is it White Teeth?
White Teeth. Yeah,
White Teeth.
I think she. I definitely remember reading an interview with her where she said that she would kind of cringe rereading it.
Yeah, even though it won multiple awards.
Yeah,
it was an international best-selling.
Yeah, and it's an extraordinary piece of writing.
Yeah. So going back to you.
Yeah.
It must have felt very jarring going from journalism and into this very slow process that is publishing. But did it feel like a lot happened between 2019 when you'd written the book and you'd put the book out to some people, and 2021 and it came out?
Oh goodness, yes. I mean, the whole. People talk about kind of roller coasters, but it was a lot of very unexpected things happened very, very quickly, which if you'd kind of told me in 2018 this is how it's going to go for you, I just would have laughed my head off. So I had been I was a classic kind of child who used their school exercise books to write novels in inverted commas, and it had always been like the thing I dreamed of the most. To write a novel. And but I was really crippled by kind of, I guess, sort of shyness, lack of confidence about it. And that was really, I was very embarrassed about it because, in my day job, I was writing kind of, hundreds of words a day, sometimes thousands of words a day. Yeah. And, that was fine. But I really, really struggled. And I'd never sort of got past the first chapter of anything. And then in kind of the start of 2019, I sort of sort of quite a lot of big life things had happened. I was turning 30. I'd broken up with someone, and I sort of said to myself, like, like you've just got to, if you don't do it now, this is just going to slip. So, so I set myself the task of writing the first 3 chapters, and to kind of make myself do it, to sort of give me a deadline, which I thought I would need. I entered the Lucy Cavendish Fiction Prize, which you mentioned at the start. Literally just kind of give me a day to work to, where I had to have 3 chapters done, and it was the only competition I could find where you didn't have to have a full manuscript. So I thought, right, well, that's fine. This is an end in itself. I'm just, I will just do this. I will never hear anything again, but it has made me make a start, and that's good. Anyway, I was then longlisted for it, and then shortlisted for it, and I mean, it had never entered my head that those things would happen. And then I ended up getting an agent before I'd finished the manuscript, which was, I mean,
wow.
That is something that is, that it's unusual for that to happen in fiction. And that was, I had not even, I thought I was years away from kind of having to think about having an agent. So it was just a huge amount of stuff that happened very, very quickly. And then I got my book deal for 2 books with Century, my publisher. It was about a fortnight before the first lockdown that happened, and so then suddenly the world changed, and my working life changed, and kind of in one respect. I mean, the timing was, I was unbelievably lucky, because it gave me a degree of like security during the pandemic. But it was a complete 180. I'd gone from being someone who was writing their first novel kind of around their day job, like on my notes app on the bus to work and in my lunch break, to someone who was sitting in their flat by themselves, being told, right, you now have to write a second novel. Kind of
here's your deadline.
Here's it. And which was wonderful, but also terrifying and really quite disorientating. And it's not it's definitely not something to complain about, because it sounds very like, my diamond shoes are too small. But it was just as you said, a lot happened in a comparatively short space of time, and that was before the book before there were even proofs of it.
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of sort of lifestyle transformations, that sounds like suddenly being told, okay, now you need to write a second book, here's the deadline for your second book. That sounds like something you really need to rise to. Was that difficult?
It was so difficult. And again, it was something that it was difficult in really unexpected ways, because I think for lots of us, like, and certainly for me, like, having been a writer who had to squeeze in writing a book around the rest of my life and the rest of my working life, I used to kind of dream of having a full day, a full week to kind of concentrate, and not just have to sort of switch into all these different modes all over again.
Yeah.
But then when it happened, when I then was kind of, that was my task for kind of 6 months, basically, to sort of, write this second novel. I mean, the circumstances were quite extreme in that, it was impossible to kind of go anywhere, to kind of get any sort of flow of air through your brain, any kind of new. Yeah, I found it incredibly daunting, and the process of writing that novel was so much less. I don't want to say easy, because I don't think writing a book is ever really easy for most. It certainly isn't for me, but it was
less free.
It was much less straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay,
than
because you have
the
all
first one.
Pressure now.
Yeah.
Whereas in the first one, it's like, I'm writing a book, something might come of it, something might not. I'm just going to do it at my own pace, as suits me.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's kind of it's different sorts of anxiety. Like before you have a contract, it's it's a shot in the dark, and you have to kind of always contend with that worry that it might never go anywhere. This might all have been for nothing.
Yeah.
But then on the other side of that is, when you do have a contract, it's like, no, you have to do this. Like, it doesn't matter, how many wrong turns you think you've made, or, how much you're struggling with this, making this concept work. You have to do this because it's your job now.
Yeah.
And that was, I definitely set myself a really challenging novel to write, and it was terrifying. And I think I wrote the entire thing and then chucked almost all of it out maybe 4 times.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was lucky there was nothing else to do.
I do think, though, that shows maturity as a writer, is the willingness to be more cutthroat with your editing and just say, right, I'm cutting 50,000 words. Let's go again.
Yes. Well, that's very nice of you. Well, I think I was sometimes it can you're sort of having had because I was when I was a journalist. Well, I still am a journalist, but I have been an editor for quite a lot of my career, like specifically a copy editor, and which I love. And I think that part of your brain, the part that's kind of looking at something from above and thinking, no, there's something's not working here, and we need to figure out what it is. That can, I think, as a writer, that can really inhibit you, because it can and does for me really. It can really slow you down if you're constantly second guessing yourself. But I do sort of feel like, if I've learned that kind of when I have that gut feeling that something is not working in a particular chapter, or even in a manuscript, like a whole character, I kind of learn not to push through it, because I don't think it's, looking back, it's never been misplaced, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I've had a number of journalists on the podcast, and there does seem to be a feeling that journalists find the editorial and copy editing part of publishing much easier than people who haven't come from a journalism background. Did you find that?
That's really interesting. Do you mean that, like, they're just kind of more, they understand that this is something that has to happen to your work? Like, yeah.
And I think they're also very thick-skinned, because journalism, the editors and copy editors in journalism can be very cutthroat, because it needs to be quick. So they don't have time to sort of say it politely and nicely to you. They say, no, this has to go, this has to go, this has to go. It's a very quick turnover. Whereas there's more a feeling in publishing, because it is a bit slower, of sort of softening, and also obviously the work is more personal, because it is something that's come so individually from the author, whereas a lot of journalism is about an external thing.
Yes.
Thick skins. I've learned that journalists generally have thick skins.
Yeah, you do sort of have to develop one, depending on what kind of working environment you're in. I mean, I started my career on a like in newspapers, then moved to magazines, which can be somewhat gentler on the ego, but not always. But yes, definitely, it's been very helpful to me, I think, as a novelist, in that I came to it with an awareness of the fact that it takes a village, and actually kind of the more brains that you have on something, the better.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm sure I am completely infuriating for my publisher because I've spent a lot of my kind of time in journalism was kind of writing headlines and stand first and kind of the display copy for things.
Uh-huh.
So, whenever I'm writing books, that's kind of, I'm visualizing it like, if I pick this book up, what would I read on the back? What would the kind of elevator pitch be? Which can be, I'm sure, I'm sure that's quite frustrating as a publisher when your author's like, I've got all these ideas, and I think we can say this and this. And
well, I guess that depends on the quality of the ideas. Yeah. Did they use any of your ideas?
No, they're very. My editor is brilliant, and she really includes me in all the discussions, which I'm so grateful for, because I do really enjoy them as well. But I sometimes worry it's a bit like when like you're cooking and like your child wants to help and you're 5 years old, like you'll just break everything, so you just give them a tiny blunt knife and like a piece of Play-Doh, and you're like, okay, go and cut that up.
Yeah. I'm helping.
Exactly.
Oh, that's great. We glossed over it a little bit. I did just want to ask. It was after you'd written the book and you'd been shortlisted for a couple of awards. That was when you found your agent, and that's another Emma
yes,
Finn over at CNW. Yeah. So was that? You said that she signed with you before you'd even finished the novel. Was that as a result of being shortlisted for the awards?
So, I mean, the way we the way we met is it's a lovely story. I think it's a bit like a kind of romantic comedy. But when I got shortlisted for the award, I kind of out of the blue, I had offers of representation from a couple of agents.
Oh wow!
And I'd had, as I said, I'd had no concept that this is something that might happen, and I was just a bit kind of floored because I hadn't even begun to think like I hadn't allowed myself to think sort of what kind of agent might I want to have, who might be a good fit. And but I thought, oh God, I'm like, I need to say yes to one of these people, even though I don't feel like I'm kind of ready. And they were all amazing. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to choose. But then she followed me on Twitter one morning, and I clicked on her profile, and it said she was interested in books, dinners, and dogs. And I thought, oh well, I like those things too. That's good. And I sort of, I think my kind of having gone from being such a kind of unconfident person about my writing, it wasn't exactly that I was confident, but I was just sort of in this kind of weird dreamscape. And I thought, well, maybe she wants to represent me as well. That's nice. Oh, maybe she'll email me. And I waited and waited, and an email never came. And sort of after a few days, I realised I was feeling a bit I kept checking her profile, and I was like, I think I might email her because she sounds great. So I sent her this email, which I reread it occasionally when I want to feel really bad about myself, and I just cringe because it's got typos in it. It's just mortifying, and it's just like, I have not completed my manuscript, but perhaps you'd like to read. I sent it, and I got a very nice reply back saying, thank you so much. Yes, I'll definitely, but I'm very busy. And I thought, oh God, she, probably just, I've blown it. And then a couple of hours later, I got another email saying I kind of downed tools to finish reading your manuscript.
A couple of hours later?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And he said, can we speak on the phone? And so I went out of the office, and I sort of phoned her. I remember I was sitting on like it was like a sort of fly tip around the back of the office, and I was sitting on like a broken wheelie chair. And we just we just, I just thought she was fantastic, and exactly the kind of person that I was looking for, in that she is very much she's an agent who really loves editing and has a real flair for editing. And she's also just a really kind person with, amazing sort of emotional intelligence and sensitivity. And I just sort of knew, as they say. So yeah, that was how it happened.
That's great. It's funny that you were waiting for her to email you. the idea that the authors are sitting out there going, I hope these agents email me at some point.
It's just like listening back to myself saying that. I'm just like, what? That's just not how. But I think the fact that it had kind of happened a few times, I was like, oh, well, maybe I literally don't know how anything works anymore.
It's funny. Well, it all worked out in the end.
It did all work out in the end, yeah.
Yeah. Even with your typo-ridden email.
Oh, dear, yeah.
But that just goes to show it's about the she sort of prefaced it by saying, I'm very, very busy, but the writing really grabbed her and really obviously reached something from the get-go that she had to read it all and then immediately call you back, because 2 hours is a crazy turnaround.
Yeah. And I think that is something that I have really, I've really learned kind of over the past 3 years, since this all started, that there are, it's not that there are kind of no rules, but there are sort of exceptions to every rule, and kind of you really have no idea how anything is going to go in publishing. I mean, there is no formula for kind of success or failure, and that's part of the joy and the excitement of it, is thinking, tomorrow my life could change. Mm-hmm. I think the kind of mental and emotional work of having to keep all possibilities in play at all times in your mind for your writing is, I think, in my experience, it's really tiring, having to write a book and sit down every day and sort of just contend with the huge question mark that is the book's future, what its life will be. And I'm really kind of, as I said, at the moment, I'm writing my third novel, and my book deal was for 2 books. So for the next one, who knows? Who knows if it will even see the light of day? Yeah. It's interesting to be kind of back in that position.
Yes.
With perhaps the benefit of, second time around with these feelings, maybe it's a bit easier.
Yeah. Well, you know what to expect now.
Yeah.
To some degree.
Yes.
Yeah. And we've talked about a little bit your work as a journalist, which is mostly in food and travel. Is that right?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, I was just thinking about it and I was like, these are great areas of interest for someone who writes romantic comedy, because those are 2 things that often come up within the genre.
Yes.
But I saw on your website, you've also done an interesting place to do it on Reddit. You also did a bit of relationship advice and discussed the future of dating apps. How did that come about?
Yes. Yeah. Those are 2 of my favorite pieces that I've ever written, actually. I mean, I guess the whole kind of genesis of No Such Thing as Perfect was a real interest in dating apps and how they work or don't work. And as part of my research for the book, I interviewed quite a lot of people who had worked on dating apps, helped to build them, and they told me some really quite hair-raising stuff, which I sort of guessed was true, like having used dating apps kind of on and off for quite a while, but to have it confirmed, I thought, oh God, well, that's the human race is doomed. But then when it came to sort of promote the book when it came out, I thought, well, this is actually something that I can, do some journalism about, and it's I think it's something that people are perennially interested in the the all kind of because just like writing a book, kind of embarking on a relationship is a complete unknown, and you can meet someone and like someone, but you cannot possibly control the outcome or do and it's that kind of unknown is it can be terrifying. And I think people, the idea that you can kind of calibrate it or shape it in some way is really compelling, especially to people who are kind of feeling a bit lost. So that was the sort of where the kind of whole idea for the book came from. And I guess the piece on the Reddit's relationship subreddit, which I've been a reader of for a long time, I guess that kind of comes from the same place. I think, like, as a writer, everything I write is about love and relationships, which I don't think necessarily means I'll always write romantic comedies. I don't know, but I really, the thing I love most of all, and the thing that kind of drives me, is almost like taking the back off the clock and seeing and saying, oh yes, right, I see. Yeah, that's what all these gears are doing, and this is how these two people work together or don't, and this is why. And that's kind of something I've been interested in my whole life, I guess, if that doesn't sound too creepy.
No, I think it's the perfect thing to be interested in the sort of subject matter that you are writing about in your books, because that's what you need to be, dissecting and then putting together and seeing what kind of funny combinations you can make work.
Yes.
And what did you, in that research that you did for dating apps, what was your conclusion on the future of dating apps?
Well, the sort of upshot of all my conversations with people who built these apps was that there is no matching algorithm that actually works any better than kind of random. It's all of these kind of claims to scientific, being able to deduce your compatibility, it doesn't work. Does not work. There is no such thing. And that really your best bet is to, if you're going to use an app, to use one that is kind of as random as possible, if that makes sense, like that sort of almost replicates that experience of walking into a room full of people. You want to kind of just have a lot of people shown to you kind of in quite quick succession. Really, that was so actually kind of the the most badly designed apps can sometimes be the most effective.
Well, isn't that somewhat depressing, but quite funny?
But love will always find a way. I really believe that.
Yes, we have to keep believing that, right? Hope. And before we get to the final question, you, as you mentioned, do have a new book. What is it? When can we get our hands on it?
I do. So I am, well, I think I can say a tiny bit about it because it's got a kind of holding cover up on Amazon.
Okay.
But it's called It's Complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It will be out next year, and it is sort of about the question of two friends trying to figure out if they might have a child together. That's the kind of jumping off point. But sort of beyond that, it's about the kind of the complications of female friendships when you're in your mid-30s and everybody wants kind of different things out of their lives, and also about families and about how much of what we are looking for as adults can be shaped by what we had or didn't have as children within our kind of original families. And I think also as well about kind of getting to the age where you have to start taking care of your parents as well, and have to, stop relating to them purely as their child, and, actually step up into a role where you are caring as well. So it's about all of that, and there's a cat. So
oh, great, sold. There's a cat. Sign me up. Amazing. That's I'm looking forward to it. Sounds great. Great jumping off point. Can't wait for it to come out. And that brings us onto the final question, which, as always, is: if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book would you take?
Well, I prepared a whole answer for this. But then I've scrapped it, and I've got a new one as of yesterday.
Textbook you.
Yeah, exactly. Because the author of one of my favourite novels of all time, she died a week ago, and I only found out yesterday, and I was really quite devastated about it, and so I thought I'd talk about her book instead of the one I prepared, because actually I think it would be a great choice. It's called The Girl's Guide to Hunting and Fishing, and the author's name was Melissa Bank, and it's a book. It's a sort of collection of interlinked short stories, all about the same young woman, kind of starting. I think she's kind of a teenager, and then it takes her through almost to her 40s, and it's about her relationships, but about so much more, kind of her family, work, all of those things that you have to kind of figure out your place in, as you kind of leave education and get out into the world. And I think it's just a sort of perfect book. It's so funny, it's so perceptive, it's so clever, really witty, but it wears its kind of intelligence very lightly. But I was given it by a friend, and I remember looking at the cover and thinking, oh no, this looks terrible, because it had a really it came out in the mid-90s in the sort of I guess you'd call it the kind of Bridget Jones, Sex and the City, Ally McBeal kind of era, and it was very much packaged and marketed as a continuation of that, and it isn't at all. And I think her work was done a real disservice in her lifetime by the way it was marketed. But she's been a real kind of guiding light to me, really. I think reading it was the first time I'd sort of, it sounds silly, but that I'd kind of realised that I was allowed, in inverted commas, to be interested in the things that I was interested in and to want to write about them. So I think, I hope I would still be writing on the desert island, and I think it would be lovely to have her with me.
Oh, that's so nice. That's really nice that she's, like, her work has left such a lasting emotional impact on you.
Yeah, it really has.
Yeah, a great choice. That's really nice. Very sweet.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Emma, for coming on the podcast and chatting with me and sharing your experience with all of your writing and your sort of journey through publishing.
Thank you so, so much for having me. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
You are very welcome. And for anyone listening, if you want to keep up with what Emma is doing, you can follow her on Twitter at EmmaHDHughes or on Instagram at EmmaHughes86. To make sure you don't miss an episode of this podcast, follow us on Twitter at Right and Wrong UK or on Instagram at Right and Wrong Podcast. Thanks again to Emma, and thanks to everyone listening. We'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for hanging around until the end. If you're interested in starting your own podcast but aren't really sure what that looks like, I can't recommend Zencastr enough. It's so simple to host, record, and download your podcast with, and it even has a built-in transcription AI. It functions entirely in the internet browser, which means all your guests have to do is click on a link and they'll be brought into the conversation. If you click on the link in the description, you'll get 30% off the first 3 months. All you have to do is click on the link in the description. Thanks again for supporting the show, and we'll see you in the next episode.